Hello and welcome to Board Game Tutorials. I'm Cymrych Hughs from Peterson Games, and today we're going to learn how to play Cthulhu Wars. In Cthulhu Wars, each player takes control of a specific faction. Each faction has its own set of unique abilities and creatures that you can summon, and at the end of the game, the faction with the most doom is the winner. But first, let's have some quick setup. Alright, now that that's done, let's quickly go over the board. Now the board has different continents that show boundaries, as well as boundaries in the oceans and seas. You can have as many of any colored character or monster, acolytes, in any of these zones. There is no limit. These icons here are for more advanced or spell-specific identity. These symbols here indicate the different factions. In the core set, you only come with 4 different factions. You have Great Cthulhu, Crawling Chaos, the Black Goat, and the Yellow Sign. Now each faction has its own Great Old One and its own set of unique creatures, monsters, and abilities. Every faction's spell cards are also different. So to randomly select your characters, what you can do is take the bag that has all of the elder signs inside of it, and instead of putting the elder signs in there, put your 4 faction tokens. Then have every player take one at random. Whatever faction token you draw is the faction you play. Now the thing about the Great Cthulhu faction, the Great Cthulhu will always start the game as first player. If you choose not to use that rule, then choose at random as you see fit. But after factions are chosen, these tokens will be useless and can be returned to the game box. Now, on your faction sheet, it will show you 6 available spells. You're allowed to look through your spell book as often as you like, because every one of your spell books has a different ability on it. Now, on your faction sheet, it'll tell you how to unlock that spell, and at any time you fulfill the requirements, you can immediately put one of your spells in its spot. Now that ability will forevermore be used. Some of your abilities give you pre-battle abilities. Some are post-battle. And there's a timing for those later on during the battle. Some of them give you actions you can take during your turn. Some of them are ongoing, which means they're always in effect, and it is up to the player themselves whether they want to utilize that ongoing effect or not. Now during setup, when you choose the first player, they will take the first player token. Now these arrows indicate that the first player can choose whether play order goes in clockwise order or counterclockwise order. And that will be chosen during the first player phase. In the last bit of setup, you'll find your faction symbol on the map. That is where you will start the game. We'll put 1 gate on that zone and put 1 cultist on that gate, indicating that that is a controlled gate controlled by you. You will also place your other 5 acolytes who will just hang out and be in the same zone for now. After setup is complete, you will immediately start the action phase. Now, in the beginning of the game, all players will start the game with 8 power. You have a set of 7 common actions. 1. If some of your cultists are dead, your first action is to recruit a cultist. You spend 1 power and can place a cultist on any zone you have your presence in. Your next action is the recruit monster. Now, on your faction sheet, it'll tell you how much it costs to summon each individual monster type. Now, when you summon a monster, after spending, in this case, 2 power to summon a Shoggoth, they can only spawn in zones that have a controlled gate. Next, we have the Awaken Great Old One. Now down here it shows every Great Old One has their own unique requirements for being summoned into the world. They have a cost, how much combat dice they're worth. Remember, when you summon a Cthulhu, you will gain 1 Elder Sign. Now these are supposed to be kept face down. You're allowed to look at them, but you'll keep it face down until you decide to play it, in which case you discard it from the game and gain that many Doom, or you can keep it face down to be gained as bonus points at the end of the game. This here is Great Cthulhu. Now, Cthulhu has his own special Devour pre-battle ability, but we'll go into those later. Next is Move. During this move action, you are now allowed to move any number of your people on the board, but they will cost 1 power per unit moved. And when you move a unit, they can only move 1 space. So if I wanted to move an Acolyte, a monster, and Great Cthulhu himself, that would cost 3 power. During your turn, if you spend 3 power, you can place a new gate anywhere you have a cultist. Next up is Battle. So if it is Great Cthulhu's current turn and they decide to battle, it will cost 1 power to battle, and you will go into the pre-battle phase. If you have any pre-battle abilities that take effect now, you can use those. You start with the attacker and then the defender. And then after that, you move on to the next phase, which is the calculate combat and roll dice. So on your faction sheet, it'll tell you all of your monsters and how much dice they're worth. Now, Great Cthulhu has an Acolyte. They have 0 dice. Great Cthulhu also has a Shoggoth, which is worth 2 dice. And then a Star Spawn is worth 3 dice. On the opposing team, they have a Night Gaunt, which appear to be worth 0 combat dice, but he also has a Flying Polyp, which gives him 1. So for the sake of combat, let's say he did not have a Night Gaunt. He had a Hunting Horror instead. That Hunting Horror will also add 2 dice to his combat pool. At this point, you will now roll simultaneously. That is a phenomenal roll rate. Now the way combat works is a 6 counts as a kill. A 5 or a 4 counts as pain. Now when assigning these, you'll go based on kills first. You'll give that kill to your opponent, and your opponent gets to choose what gets killed. Now, during this point, if you have any post-battle abilities you would like to play, you can also play those before combat goes off. Next, we move on to Pain. Now, the Great Cthulhu faction has 3 points of pain, but only 1 unassigned monster. So they will only give the 1 point of pain to their opponent, who will then apply it to the Hunting Horror. Now you will assign your results simultaneously. 6s will kill anything assigned a 6. And 5s and 4s will assign pain, which means they now have to move one space away. And our final common action is Capture Cultist. Now the way Capture Cultist works is you will spend 1 power, and if you have a monster in an area with an acolyte, you can claim that acolyte and put it off on your faction board. However, if there is another monster in this area, this acolyte is considered guarded. You cannot capture a guarded acolyte. However, if you follow the hierarchy up, a Great Old One can in fact capture an acolyte if only a monster is present. And that's all of the 7 common actions. We also have a couple of unlimited actions. Now these are to be played before and or after your current action, but never during your action. One of them is control or abandon a gate. Say that acolyte's here and this acolyte's here. You're going to make a move action, but before you do, you abandon that gate. That costs 0 power. During your move action, you want to move him away and this acolyte into that space. Now after your turn is over, you can take the unlimited action to claim that gate. Your other unlimited action is called Unlimited Battle. Now normally you can only take 1 battle per turn. However, if you have gained all 6 of your spell books, you are now allowed to participate in unlimited battle, which means you could effectively have 3 different battles in 1 turn. Before your action, you can take unlimited battle, fight. Then during your turn, you can perform a battle and fight here. And then after your turn, you can perform a second unlimited battle and fight again. Now, those are the 7 common actions and your 2 unlimited actions. That makes up the action phase. You will continue playing actions until all factions have 0 power. There are ways to gain power, but if it is your turn and you have 0 power, you have to pass. If at a later time you gain a couple of power, then yes, you're allowed to continue taking action. But if you have 0 at the beginning of your turn, you must pass, and you cannot take any action, even if that action costs 0 power. Now, once all players have reached 0 power and have passed, we now move on to the Gather Power phase. During the Gather Power phase, for every cultist you have on the board, you gain 1 power. Next, for every controlled gate you own, you gain 2 power. We now move on to Abandon Gates. If there's ever a gate that does not have a cultist on it, all players get to score 1 power for that gate. And then lastly, Captured Cultists. You get to score 1 additional power for every captured cultist you have. Now you return that cultist to the original owner. Now there's something here called the minimum power rule. Say after this, Great Cthulhu only scored 5 power, but Crawling Chaos got 14. The minimum power rule indicates whoever has the highest power, you cut that number in half, and then you round it up. In this case, 14 cuts evenly in half by 7. Any other faction that does not have at least 7 gets to move up to that 7. After that comes the first player phase. During the first player phase, whoever scored the most power during the Gather Power phase gains the first player token, and at that point can choose which direction to make player order go. After that's over, we go into the 4th and final phase of the game round. That is the Doom phase. During the Doom phase, you get to score Doom based on how many controlled gates you own. For every controlled gate is 1 Doom. After that, it is up to each player in turn order to decide if they would like to perform a Ritual of Annihilation. Now what that is the ritual track, which is indicated by the number of players, and it goes all the way up to 8. But during your turn, during the Doom phase, every section of the ritual track shows a number. In this case, the lowest is 5, the highest is 10, and it ends with instant death. Since Crawling Chaos has so much extra power, they can spend 5, move the ritual track token up by 1, which means from now on, if somebody wants to perform the ritual, it now costs more. Now, if you perform the ritual, you now get to score your controlled gates for Doom a second time. Since Crawling Chaos has 2 controlled gates, they will gain 2 additional Doom. Now, lastly, if you have your Great Old One in play and you do perform a Ritual of Annihilation, as a bonus, you get to gain an additional Elder Sign token. Crawling Chaos performed the Ritual of Annihilation, but did not have their Great Old One on the board. After that, we start all the way back at the action phase. Now, endgame can happen one of 2 ways. One, if any player reaches 30 on the Doom track. This can happen during 2 times. Most commonly, it'll happen during the Doom phase, in which case you will complete your entire Doom phase before ending the game, allowing everybody a chance to gain more Doom through Ritual Track, Ritual of Annihilation, or by spending Elder Sign tokens. However, during play, even if it is not your turn and you have Elder Sign tokens, you can play them face up, immediately gain that Doom. These will get discarded from the game, and at the end of that current player's turn, the game will immediately end. Another way you can end the game is the ritual track for the Ritual of Annihilation. At any time you reach the highest level of ritual and you pay the power required to perform that ritual, you'll move on to instant death. Now at this point the game will end immediately. However, every other player in turn order will still get their opportunity to perform their Ritual of Annihilation if they have enough power. It will cost the same as if it were the highest cost on the track. So after all players have had a chance to perform a Ritual of Annihilation to gain what little bit more Doom they can, that will be the end of the game. During the end of the game, whoever has the most Doom is the winner. If you have any Elder Signs that are not currently flipped, you may now flip them and add that Doom to your final score. Now that's the basics for Cthulhu Wars. In all honesty, it goes so much deeper than that. All the strategies and the spell books. Every faction has their own unique abilities and a few different ways to play them. Each faction has a couple of different ideas or strategies. There's a lot to it. But once you get the hang of it, it's fairly simple. The game itself has so much variety, especially when you buy some of the expansions, the extra factions. There are neutral factions you can hire from. All sorts of goodies. But as of right now, we're just going over the core set. And honestly, that's all I've got for you. So thank you for joining me and learning Cthulhu Wars. Have a good night.